Welcome back to Gruber Motor Company. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning and welcome to the Tesla Roadster Afternoon Podcast.
You did say good morning, but that's okay.
Well,
yeah,
we're used to doing
I'm a
little confused because I'm seeing a picture up there that we had yesterday morning.
Yeah, I'm going to change that. By the way, we're also seeing through your shirt currently, so we're going to fix that as well. Give us a second.
Oh, yes. I have a semi-transparent shirt now, it looks like.
Interesting. That's almost like my infrared photography. Well, anyway, today we have an interesting podcast for the Tesla Roadster owners. We'll cover some of the news items and some of the agenda in this session, but we have a video release that pertains to the Tesla Roadster, and we're going to talk about that later on in the podcast.
Yeah, we had found some information on the Tesla Roadster and its battery packs and what those battery packs might act like when they get to a true end of life. It does appear that we have the first end of life situation in some battery packs on Roadsters. So we'll get through some of the questions that you may have. Please give us your name and location where you're coming from. We'll get through some of the news items and technical articles that we have today as well. And then we'll go back into this information about end of life in a little bit more detail.
The image behind us, by the way, is three of the rare Tesla Roadster colors. And what we have there is brilliant yellow in the foreground. The only insane green that was produced by Tesla in the United States is in the middle, VIN 100, by the way. And just for comparison, we have a lightning green Roadster, which is the third Roadster, where you can see the difference in green between the insane green and the lightning green. Insane green, there was only one, of course, made in the US. There were a number made in Europe, however. It was a more popular color there for some reason. And it could be because it was an original Lotus color. But these are the three most rare colors in the Roadster world, and we were fortunate to have three of them at the service center at one time, so we were able to take this picture.
That's amazing. I remember having that yellow Roadster in. It's the only one I think I had ever seen of that color. It's like a canary yellow or something like that. Just stunning. It was a beautiful vehicle, as they all are.
We have a TikTok question that's come in already from Ron, and he says, generally speaking, what is the average lifespan of the current battery systems in electric vehicles? Well, that's part of our video release today, and the technical information we're going to release is that we seem to have finally found out what the end-of-life indication for the Tesla Roadster battery pack is, and it's exceeding all expectations. It was supposed to be a 10-year design life, and it's actually going on 15 years. So stay tuned. We're going to hit a few of these items in the podcast, and then we'll get back and describe what we found with the Tesla Roadster battery packs.
I know that we have some Tesla Model S's that are 2012 and 2013 and still going strong. We've seen Model S's that we have here in the company. We've seen customer Model S's as well.
And the reason the Model S is important is because the battery cells are virtually identical to what's in a Tesla Roadster. They're 18650 cells connected in parallel series. So from the previous Tesla Roadster podcast, we had a follow-up question from a German customer. And he says, hi, I follow your podcast with interest. The time difference in Europe makes it difficult to follow live. You have to be up pretty late, I guess. Or early. It's 9 hours difference.
I think it's late.
They're ahead of us.
I think it's late in this case.
His question is, how has the delivery capacity and delivery time changed for the R80 upgrade battery packs? Again, the R80 upgrade battery packs is the 80 kW replacement battery pack. The first one was released in 2016. It went on a hiatus for a while and then resumed in 2021. The lead time has actually improved quite a bit. When Tesla was allowing elective replacements and bricked car replacements, there just didn't seem to be enough available. So what ended up happening in fall of last year, Tesla finally decided we're no longer going to allow elective battery replacements for the Roadster. If your car's running, keep it running. We're going to service the VOR, or the vehicle off-road vehicles, or the brick Roadsters. And since then, we've heard from customers that the lead times from request for battery to actual installation is anywhere from 2 months to 6 months. Now, he's in Europe, and Europe may be a bit different, so we don't have a lot of meaningful data yet. And we'd love to hear from the Roadster owners to see what your experiences have been outside of the U.S. He asks a question also. He says, many of us are interested to place an order at Tesla. However, service communication for Roadsters is quite troublesome here in the EU. What we suggest is email us your request. On a monthly basis, we send the Roadster battery requests to Tesla, all of the brick cars, and we update them. And we know they're watching because we usually get a thank you response. And we've also found that customers are able to get their batteries once they're in our system. If you want to see who is waiting for a battery, you can go to our website to the census program, and you'll see all of the brick Roadsters there. There's a search field. If you want to see just the bricked ones, you type bricked into that search window, and you'll see all the brick Roadsters and see how many people are ahead of you.
And to communicate with us, you can always send that email to ev@gruber.com.
Correct. All right, and we have some items that we wanted to cover today. I guess there's some questions streaming in. Let's see if we can clear some of those.
Sure. Wonderful from TikTok. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Has a Model S 2018. He says his tires are still okay, but they need to change soon. Any recommendations?
You know, we're not in the tire business, but I'm sure a Big O or Discount Tire would give you a range of options, or even Costco for that matter, or Walmart. And you'll see the prices are there's quite a range there, from $100 to $300 or $400 per tire.
I do know that EV-specific tires are starting to be manufactured. They are a little bit more pricey than the standard ones. I don't know a lot of information about them beyond the fact that they're designed to handle the higher weight load of the electric vehicles and the different distribution of weight due to the batteries.
Sure. We have a TikTok comment from Wonderful. He says there's no image, it's just green screen. And then we've got another response from Van Goat Wagon, who's one of our regular audience members. He said it's on YouTube, and the YouTube broadcast is worth it. We will eventually, for our TikTok audience, have images behind us, but it's still not quite there.
We are definitely working with TikTok and with our streaming software vendor to try to get all of the technical issues ironed out so that TikTok will eventually be able to see the full image.
So Jesse, if we can throw up image number 1 under the charge port door. One of the things we wanted to cover today is, and we've had this in our tech tip dissemination, the Tesla Roadster charge port door is not waterproof. And we'll show you later on what happens as these cars age. So you don't want to leave your Roadster out in the rain. It's just not good for the car. An occasional car wash doesn't seem to do much damage, but the steady water that you get from leaving it outside definitely can cause a problem. If you notice too, there's that little black sponge ring that's in the center of that charge port door. Mm-hmm. That is the correct orientation, and sometimes those will turn and spin, and then you actually get water into the charge port, the connector itself as well. If we can go to the next images, we can show what the problem with the charge port is. By the way, the charge port colors. White is a charge port door open, charge mode is initiated. It's normally dark. Blue is if you have a connection between the vehicle and the high power connector being successful. A blue flashing is preparing to charge, or the battery is heating or cooling. Mm-hmm. An amber flashing is when it finally does the final click, and you can hear that from your PEM as a pre-charge circuit comes online, and it is amber flashing. That means that the charge is in process, and you can look at your VDS screen and get some readings as to what the charge rate is. When it goes green, that means your charge is complete, and if it goes red, that means a fault has been detected. So let's go to image number 4 and then 6. And this is what happens. Is that number 4?
Yeah, that was number 4. This one's number 6.
Okay. The
This is 4.
So this
Okay.
is 4.
there's a housing that is part of the circuit board, and when that fills up with water, it creates corrosion. And if we go to image number 6 actually, there we go. You can see what's happening to that circuit board. There's a TVSS chip there, and it stands for transient voltage surge suppression. That chip on this particular board, the pins are actually corroded off on one side, on the right side. It has gotten that bad. If we go to the next image, and it's image number 7, I believe, we'll see the connector. No, you got to go back, I guess. You know, one of these days I'm going to have it there. That's the one, yes. When that housing fills up with water and this connector sits inside the water, this is what happens. There's voltage on these pins at all times, and the water oftentimes is somewhat conductive from minerals or salts or whatever. And eventually, the pins on this particular one, you can see to the right, is actually corroded off, and all that's left is some of that green copper oxide. Now, the problem with allowing the board to get this bad is, this is a part that's no longer in production. And like most Roadster parts, you can't just simply buy 5 or 10 of them from the original vendor because they have minimum order quantities that you have to meet. So what we end up having to do is to repair these. Now, here's another issue. If we can go to the image with the LEDs. The LEDs that were used on this charge port circuit board were a particular anode-cathode configuration. It's a tricolor LED, so it illuminates 3 different colors, and it has a number of pins. This particular LED with that particular anode-cathode combination is no longer available. We searched high and low, and in order to find something that you can use, you have to rewire the circuit board. Now it gets a bit more complicated. We happened to luck out, and we found that the original vendor that made these had a few of these tricolor LEDs left over. And just to show you the kindness of the community, they actually sent us what they had left for free. They gave them to us. So we do have some spare LEDs. What we don't have is any spare circuit boards, and those are going to be hard to replace. Very expensive to replace, let's put it that way. Now, what we end up doing, if we can go to image number 1, it's the blue image. We actually do a number of things to weatherproof this charge port. And one of them is we seal off the gap that exists between that light ring.
The one with the white light ring.
Yeah, it has a blue base down on the bottom.
No.
A blue base.
It was the first image that you showed.
I'm going to give you a number here in a second, Jesse. It's number 2, image number 2. So what we do is we actually close off that gap. And by the way, the molds for this plastic contraption, for this charge port, we actually have that. There we go. So that gets closed off. And then if you can go to image number 8, the second thing we do after a repair to waterproof this charge port assembly is we inject silicone into the housing to make sure that no water can ever get back in there. There we go.
Now, was it the vendor that gave us the LEDs that actually gave us the, or sold us, one of the two, the additional?
It was actually Tesla.
It was actually Tesla that gave us that stuff.
Yes. And of course, they realized that we're into preservation, Roadster preservation, and that we're keeping these cars alive. So that was, again, an act of generosity, which, by the way, we find that the Roadster community is a very close-knit, small, tight community with a lot of people that are highly motivated to keep these cars alive. And this is not an uncommon situation where people are actually donating things. Like we said in the last podcast, those little keys that were recommending people don't throw away, but take them off the car because they will break, and when they break, they're in a world of hurt.
Right.
You can donate that to us, and we actually allow people to go into our library when they break theirs so they can get that tire or that wheel off to have that tire fixed.
Facebook, Mike Angelini has a comment about this for us as well. First, thanks for joining us this afternoon, Mike. He says it seems like an easy fix.
It's an easy fix until you get into a part where the circuit board is extremely corroded. Fortunately, this is not a multi-layer board. In multi-layer boards, you have real estate in many different layers. The CIC board, for example, has 7 layers, and they're not visible to the naked eye. So when you have a part that burns up on the board that chars and creates a cavity or a cavern, that's a tough fix because you have to somehow recreate all of those etches that you can't see.
Van Goat from YouTube. Welcome this afternoon, Van Goat. Good to see you again. Have you seen any plans for a convertible Tesla?
The Roadster, of course, which comes in 3 flavors. You get a hard top, you get a soft top, and it's a convertible. And no, we have seen nothing from Tesla at least. But like with most car manufacturers or car brands, eventually an aftermarket company picks up that task and they will do a convertible conversion.
You know, do you think anyone would ever go all Lee Iacocca? The story goes on Chrysler, he took over and they didn't have a convertible. They were one of the few car companies that didn't have it. So he took a chainsaw and cut off the top and said, there we go, make this. And they made one of their convertibles.
So that was the inspiration for the engineers, right?
That was the inspiration for the engineers, yes. Yes, it was.
Pretty cool. By the way, this the session that we just covered on the Tesla charge port door is available in our Tech Tip library. And if you email us, ev@gruber.com, and sign up for the Tech Tips, these are the kinds of information that you will get, including the pictures, the descriptions, and some of the things to watch for with your Tesla Roadster.
You know, as with the charge port ring, there are a lot of parts that don't get made anymore with Tesla Roadsters. The community has been wonderful about sharing these parts with us, though. People who have extra parts have been, in some cases, willing to donate them. In other cases, have been willing to sell them. And it's been a wonderful thing for us to be able to get that inventory, get them stocked on our shelves, and be able to use them for the Tesla Roadster community.
Sure.
The biggest part of the business that we have at Gruber Motors is still repairing Tesla Roadsters. I don't know exactly the percentage, but I'm going to guess that it's still probably 75 or 80% of what we do, even though the Roadster community is only about 2,000 cars. Yeah,
that's a good percentage. And with parts, by the way, we just got a shipment, by the way, of parts from up north. And a lot of the Roadster owners, or some of them at least, stockpiled parts. And or they ended up with some extras. They usually contact us, and we will give you a dollar amount for those parts if you want to sell them. And it doesn't matter whether they're new, broken. This batch that we just bought were a bunch of used parts that most likely will need repair. They were modules, for example, the switch pack modules. We have a VMS module. We'd love to find some more PEMs. But all of these parts are valuable to us because if they're broken, we repair them, and then it helps a car live on.
Yes, most definitely. You know, before we continue on with this, Van Goat came with a really good question. He asks, is the charging port issue contained only to the Roadsters?
You know, there were some design issues that were strictly Roadster related. And yes, the charge port door, the water not being waterproof is a Roadster only problem. We've seen nothing in the later vehicle platforms that indicate that there's any kind of water ingress. The other one is the fact that if you don't charge a Roadster for 2 months, it'll get bricked. It will reach a state where that charge port door will not work anymore, and then the car needs to go to a specialty shop like ours in order to do what's called a battery recovery. Only the Roadsters have this problem. We've had Model S's sitting here for a couple of years at 0 charge, and we fire them up and they're still functioning. What happens in the later version cars, they have contactors that open up and remove the batteries from any kind of drain. The Roadster isn't like that.
You know, it's important for everyone to remember, and I'm sure that our community largely knows this already, but the Roadster was the first of its kind. There had been no large-scale electric vehicle put out at the time the Roadster came out. It really was the first, not counting the EV1 made by General Motors. So things like the charge port door issue, they didn't know they didn't know any better. They didn't know any different. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't that where the fuel port was? Where you put gasoline in on the Lotus Elise?
That was the Lotus Elise fuel port door. And you know, the difficulty with Roadster was it needed to get out to market fast in order to the company to remain solvent. And had they had more time to do lengthier validation testing, some of these things might have been discovered. But most of these charge port door problems didn't manifest until many years later because it was a cumulative effect. It's kind of like the condenser assembly that's in the front of the car underneath the hood vanes. In extremely wet climates, with leaves and stuff being dumped on those eventually, and water, lots of moisture, you eventually get corrosive activity, and it will actually corrode through the condenser assembly. Again, that takes years to get to that point. So in all fairness to Tesla, some of these things they just simply couldn't anticipate. Another one is the insulating material inside the PIM, which dries up and crumbles after 5 to 8 years. Well, they didn't have a long enough test period to, catch that during the validation testing. So yeah, there are things that are unique to Roadster, but like any manufacturer, they learn from their mistakes and they improve the product as they go.
Absolutely. You know, when it comes to the inventory and the parts, if you have parts and you're willing to part with them, no pun intended, please contact us at ev@gruber.com. We're constantly working to build our parts inventory. And like Pete has said once already, and I think it's important enough to reiterate, new, used, broken, you name it, we would be interested. You know, if somebody had a charge port that was broken, well, there are parts on that charge port that may not be, and we have the experience and the technical expertise to figure out what parts of a charge port would be good and what parts would not. We would salvage what's good and be able to use it in other people's charge ports when we have the charge port door issue come through.
Absolutely. And you know, the yellow charge port or the yellow charge cable for the Roadsters, we're always in short supply on those. So if anyone has any extras there, we are interested in those as well. And Jesse, if you can throw up our parts image in the images folder. I want to show you what our parts inventory is beginning to evolve into. We have an excellent parts manager, Ramiro Campos, and he does a wonderful job of keeping everything organized. On any given day you can walk back and he knows exactly where everything is, what we have, and he also does all of the order processing and the ordering. But what you see there is 3 different areas. We have the area in the main shop area with the large rack systems where we keep the large brakes, for example, calipers, rotors, and some of the body parts. And then inside the office, his office, we have the blue bins, which is where a lot of the small parts are kept. And then we have a lab where we keep the engineering or the circuit boards, spare circuit boards.
Yeah, and if you wanted to throw up the other, the image of the fan with some broken parts, sometimes these parts simply aren't built and aren't made any longer. For example, there's a fan assembly, and that fan assembly we happen to have a picture of that had some broken parts. There it is. And that fan shroud or the housing for that fan was broken to little pieces. That's something that simply isn't made any longer, and there are no vendors that can give us any kind of molds or templates or anything of that sort. It would be too costly to be able to remake something like that out of aluminum. That is a plastic fan shroud, and basically it just got brittle over time and came apart as we were trying to take the fan out. So what we did in this case was to go to carbon fiber. If you want to pull up that picture of the carbon fiber fan shroud.
It's number 2. We can show that one first. Yeah, you can see what we typically find when we change a fan on a 1.5 Roadster, and this is 1.5 specific, by the way, for the audience. There are usually fissures and cracks, and this part oftentimes is not able to go back into the car because it has been weakened so much by age, by brittleness, and it's not a great design in that you have a motor that's mounted on that sits very low in the car, and you have a lot of vibration back there. So what we ended up doing in picture number 3 is going to a carbon fiber vendor. The first pass was not up to our standards, so we ended up going with a second pass, which is a much thicker version. And of course, carbon fiber is going to be infinitely stronger than old brittle ABS plastic or even new injection molded ABS plastic. And here you can see the caliper showing the thickness of the material. So this part will literally outlast the car, we think. And but this is some of the things that we have to do, including a fair share of 3D printing to recreate parts for the Tesla Roadster.
By all means.
So YouTube, Edward Crump asks, you guys are a great resource, thank you. Do all Roadsters have a transmission? They have what's called a transaxle, kind of like the Pantera, for example, with 2 half shafts that come out to drive the rear wheels. In the early days of Roadster, they attempted to do a 2-speed transmission, and they found that because of the enormous torque, they were burning up these Borg-Warner trannies. And they eventually decided to just use a single transaxle, which is one of the reasons that the car doesn't have an impressive top speed. It runs out of RPMs at about 130 miles an hour. If it had a 2-speed transmission, that of course would take it up quite a bit higher than that.
Josh Bull from YouTube also asks, when are you going to start selling your capacitor battery?
We put our graphene project on hold fundamentally because the design indicated that the pouch batteries that we were going to be provided for the Tesla Model S tub would not contain or hold the pouch batteries. And to rebuild the pouch batteries to the specifications or geometry that we needed was cost prohibitive for a test mule. Mm-hmm. So they are proceeding, and they are finding a different way to test this in the Teslas at this point. So we are not currently working on a solid-state battery or a graphene battery or a capacitor battery.
Pete, do you want to mention what we are working on, or are we waiting on announcing that?
We're still waiting, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things that I had in this podcast was there was a question posed on Tesla Motors Club, and it was actually posed by Jameson Cummings, who, by the way, is going to be joining us most likely in our next Tesla Roadster podcast. Jameson was interviewed by us once before in the studio about 6 months ago or so, and Jameson was the first Tesla tech in the company. And he worked on Roadsters, of course, but he posed a question on Tesla Motors Club, which I wanted to share with you. I need to get my screen a little smaller here. He said, what are the parts that the Roadster owners would like in their car if they were available? And he discounts the higher current option or the liquid cooling PEM. He said, let's be real, here's some options that aren't that prevalent. Mm-hmm. He mentions wheels. Well, Carl Medlock up in Washington actually just recently announced a set of wheels, 18-inch and 17-inch, I believe. Sean Scherer here in town was working on a Roadster set of wheels, and you'll find that there are wheel manufacturers that are willing to make wheels for the Roadster. So that's already been done, and so I'm not sure who your vendor of choice there would be. We are not currently working on a wheel package, although we offer powder coating and restoration of wheels and even repairs.
Real quick, Pete.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull this up. They can go find that interview with Jameson, one of our early podcasts, if they go to our channel and look for the first Tesla tech.
Mm-hmm. And Jameson will tell you all about it next week, but he's also now in the Roadster service business, and he'll tell you where he's located and what he's able to do with Roadsters. But he also mentions upgraded brakes. Does anybody want to see upgraded brakes? Well, we have a upgraded brake package that we've been successfully selling for over a year now. We went to the same brake manufacturer that is making brakes for the Tesla Model 3. We gave them the Tesla Roadster specifications, and they came up with a performance brake package that greatly improves the stopping power for the Roadster. If you're interested, it's on our website under our shop section, and it is a superior design from the original Roadster package in that it has a two-piece rotor system. It has less unsprung weight, and
You want those images up?
yeah, let's bring that up.
Yeah, I've always heard that the Roadster is a great takeoff car, but not a great slowdown car.
Yep, that's exactly it. And the reason is no one was expecting a 1,000-pound battery in a Lotus Elise. Plenty of go power, they say, but deficient on slowing down and stopping power. So two-piece Roadster, all made in the U.S. It's a proprietary cast iron disc. It's slotted, and it reduces heat. It weighs less. And we've been installing these now for a year, and I test drive all the Roadsters. The stopping power has increased tremendously. And the other nice part about this, unlike some real performance racing brake packages, this is quieter, and it does not generate all the brake dust that really aggressive brake pads have. It's a good general run-of-the-mill performance upgrade for the Roadster, and again, specifically designed for the Roadster and designed by a company that already is a Tesla vendor and makes other Tesla product. So one of the other things that, that Jameson was suggesting was a handling package. Limited slip differential, and I'm going to let him talk about that next week because he actually has a Roadster that used to be here that has a limited slip differential. And then finally, lower the driving gearing, which of course would require a transmission because you don't want to reduce that 130 mile an hour top speed any further, although it would make it quicker off the line. So anyway, next week, look for Jameson, and we'll ask him all these questions again and see what kind of inputs he has for us.
We have a couple of questions that have come up, or a couple of comments actually as well. Josh Bull from YouTube is commenting. First, good afternoon, Josh. Thanks for joining us. It says, I have a 2017 Model X, so hopefully I won't need another replacement battery for another 6 years or so. That would be my hope as well. I think the batteries have lasted pretty well on these. Mm-hmm. EV Drew is back on TikTok. Says, hey.
Hey, okay. And then we've got Dan Rubach in Puerto Rico. Facebook, coming in on Facebook. He says, hi, Pete. See you next month. Both he and Mike Maloney, both of them have Roadsters here, are coming out to see us April 7th or 10th, I believe. And we're going to do some joint video as well because Mike Maloney has a large YouTube channel. So why don't we get to the high point of this podcast and begin to talk about our findings over the last few months?
Yeah, that's it's kind of amazing some of the things that we've found. We're going to release a video on YouTube later this afternoon that talks about end of life for the Tesla Roadster battery. Without divulging too terribly much about it, I helped lead the engineering team that was looking into the issues. I wanted to give you kind of a sneak peek of what that video is going to be about. One thing that we will say is that the 2016 battery, not the original 2008 to 2011 battery, seems to be the one that's experiencing some general failures. When we were what happened for us, the story is from our side, we had two different people come to us with Roadsters that seemed to have anemic performance. They would have trouble getting the Roadster up to even 50 or 60 miles an hour. And we're talking about the top speed of 130.
And we thought we'd seen it all.
Yeah,
and this was
we
a
really
new
did.
symptom that we had never seen before.
Yeah, we'd never seen it before, and then suddenly not one but two Roadsters are in our shop within just a couple weeks of one another, both with the same really mysterious symptoms. We wondered if it was a PEM. One of the PEMs had been rebuilt by us, but the other one had not. It was still an original PEM, had not undergone a rebuild. So through process of elimination and a process of research, we came up with a theory that maybe there was something going on with the battery pack.
And in the meantime, other customers began to call in. We do log file analysis, so when a customer has a symptom, even if it's at a Tesla service center and it's a puzzling symptom, oftentimes we're called in to do a log file analysis, to do a deep dive to see what's under the hood. And we began to see the same symptom with other cars that were either at the customer's location or at a Tesla service center, and eventually figured out that there was a common denominator.
Yes, that common denominator was the 2016 R80 battery pack. So in doing some research, helping to lead the team, I came across an article on the Journal of Electrochemical Society. These guys are German battery experts. They're specifically doing testing on lithium-ion batteries and the performance of lithium-ion batteries both under load and over time. It seemed like our issue was no acceleration. When we go to put a battery under load, we have a problem. This paper gave us a working theory that we started with. In their conclusions, they say that the investigation on which their paper was based has shown that energy density and capacity of lithium-ion batteries are greatly affected and in fact are dependent upon the quantity of electrolyte that's put into the battery when it's manufactured. If you have too little electrolyte, you lose battery capacity and you shorten the lifespan. If there's a lack of electrolyte, in fact, voltage drops immediately at the beginning of the discharging process when a battery is put under load. That right there led us to do some test drives of these particular Roadsters where we were actually measuring voltage at the moment that we would press down on the accelerator.
So at 100% throttle call, we were actually seeing a difference, comparative analysis again, between the newest R80 pack and the old 15-year-old legacy packs. And what we saw was a difference between these 2016 packs in terms of the voltage, brick voltages at 100% throttle call.
That's right. The 15-year-old packs perform better than the 2016 packs did, and the 15-year-old packs showed signs of age when you compare them to the newer 2022 R80 packs that are coming out now. So the video that's going to be dropping on YouTube here probably within the next 30 to 40 minutes is going to go into some detail to explain that, the collaboration that we're doing with Tesla and where we're at on this whole process. Tesla has been wonderfully cooperative with us, and we are working with their engineers as well.
The other oddity that we found was that the cars, the 2016 cars at least, seemed like they were all failing around this time frame, end of last year, beginning of this year, which was puzzling to us initially because these packs were released from 2016 through 2019. So why would they synchronize their failure mode or their failure time? And then it occurred to us that, like most manufacturers, you buy lots of product, and this was probably a cell lot that was all purchased at the same time. Some of them sat on a shelf and were eventually deployed in cars.
Yes, and that actually corresponds to something that we've seen with Gruber Power Services in the critical power space. Lithium-ion is a battery chemistry. Lead-acid is simply a different battery chemistry. If we go back to 2014, we had a situation with our manufacturer of lead-acid batteries where we got a bad batch. And in fact, we got bad batches over the course of about 6 months. These batteries were installed into customers' UPS systems, And starting about a year and a half later, we had all kinds of battery failures that were starting to occur. These batteries were under warranty. And the odd thing about it was that the batteries would top charge to proper voltage, but when the UPS was put under load, the batteries would suddenly drop voltage, the UPS would turn off, and they just wouldn't perform. It was as though they were bad batteries. The same type of symptoms are the one in those lead acid batteries are the ones that we've been seeing in the batteries from the 2016 R80 packs.
So what we did was we assembled all of the data. In the video, we even show some of the software that we used to do the comparative analysis. You'll see images in there. And at this point, at least, Tesla is still working on the issue. One of the cars that was in our shop is now at the Tempe Service Center. And their technical engineering experts have been going over the car and attempting to validate or corroborate our conclusions and our findings. So I'm sure that there will be more information forthcoming. But the video takes you through the process that we went through and some of the symptoms that we saw with these 2016 cars. If any of you have 2016 Roadsters, the first symptom that you will begin to see, and it will be subtle initially, it just won't have the punch. In fact, one of the customers said that his car is now feeling a bit squishy at full throttle. So it doesn't happen rapidly, but and if it is subtle, you may not realize that the original punch that you had when you floored your Roadster may not be there today. But in the advanced stages, it does get so bad that one customer, for example, in California, he lives in the hills, and he couldn't make it back up to his house at one point, so it went to a service center. One of the cars that we had in our service center, I was test driving it. I was trying to get on the freeway, and I found that it was performing worse than an ICE car trying to merge into the freeway, limited to 60 miles an hour. Everything else on the car is fine. It drives, it goes forward and reverse, all of the rest of the car functions, it just lacks any power.
As we find out more information about the causes of this these battery symptoms, we will absolutely let you guys know. In the meantime, if you have questions, you can come to us through Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, any of the channels, or you can email us, ev@gruber.com. We'll be glad to share whatever information, answer any questions that you have.
Looks like we have some YouTube questions. Van Goat, he says, look ahead 5 years. What do you guys think will be the biggest change in your industry? 5 years, Mark.
Okay, 5 years, 2028. I think the two biggest changes, I'll give you a 2-for-1 here. First, charging stations are going to be like gas stations. Right now we have all kinds of anxiety and questions and reliability issues and so on and so forth about the car charging infrastructure. Anytime somebody talks to me about that as a reason to not get an EV, I say, yeah, but okay, let's go back 100 years. Automobiles, fuel-powered automobiles were just being developed and you had all of the same issues. Range anxiety, absolutely, because you don't know where the next gas station is at. And so it's 100 years ago all over again. Just look at your history, look at how quickly the infrastructure was developed. I think it's going to happen there. The other thing, high-speed charging. There are many battery technologies that are coming out, that are starting to come to market. They'll still be new, but one of them is the ability to take in a charge that's a megawatt or more. And that will bring your charge times from 30 minutes, which is where they sit typically right now, down to somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes, which means you'll be on a electric vehicle charger roughly the same amount of time that it takes you to fill up your car with gas.
Including walking in, giving them your credit card, standing in line, waiting for the cash register.
That's
Good
exactly
point.
right.
Yeah.
So those are my two. How about you?
Well, you know, I'm a technical guy, and I loved electronics all my life. And I think what we live in right now is a very exciting time period, and that we're seeing exponential changes and improvement. And I'm at a loss to really do any predictions because things are changing so rapidly. Look at what's happened to just AI over the last 60 days.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing.
So, yeah, it's tough to predict, but 5 years will definitely be major changes. If nothing else, Lamborghini will no longer be making ICE-engined Lamborghinis. They will be EVs by 2024. We talked about that in the last podcast, and it's the only one that I feel some attachment to and some disappointment, because I'm not sure that a Lamborghini, the whole image, can ever be converted to EV successfully, because there's so much more that goes with it than just the package, the sound, the fumes coming off the car, the heat, all of that. But anyway, thank you for asking that question. It was a very good question.
Chris from YouTube also has a very good question for us. He says, hi, can you explain the technical changes from the Roadster charging connection and the new smaller plug?
Well, at the time the Roadster charge plug came out, there was nothing available, and it didn't look like that would be the new standard. I don't have one here, but it's the size of a Coke can, maybe even larger. Not quite as large as this, but similar.
Not far.
Yeah, and when Tesla came out with that, what we call the Trident connector, the 3 pins, much smaller, it made much more sense. Of course, now that design is being severely challenged because we want to continue to pump more amperage through that cable, and amperage has to do with wire size, and as we keep joking, eventually these charge cables will be the size of tree trunks in order to get the amperage that people want for the faster charging rates. But as we've said time and time again, plugging a vehicle into a cable to charge it is antiquated and is going to go away. This is just temporary. There are a number of manufacturers now working on a solar design that allows the vehicle to charge by just sitting out in the sun, or inductive coupling, where you're charging while you're driving down the road. That will be the future. So in the meantime, we have to deal with connectors. We have to watch them bloat and get bigger and bigger, but it's short-lived in my opinion.
Yeah, and there don't seem to be a lot of technical differences between the newer Trident plugs and the old can plugs that go with the Roadster.
The question that usually comes up at this point, can a Tesla Roadster DC charge or fast charge? And the answer is no, it was not built for that. However, there are some companies that have been making an aftermarket adaptation, and what they're essentially doing is tying into the regen circuitry on the PEM, injecting direct DC. So you could essentially go to a supercharger with your Tesla Roadster if you had this conversion done. My take on the Roadster is it's not a long-distance car. No one's going to try to drive 800 miles in a Tesla Roadster. You've got a cramped cabin. It's a 2-seater. There's no luggage room to speak of. And it's a fun around town car. So we have to leave the long-distance driving to the other SUVs and
guys,
Model X's.
We are at 55 minutes, just letting you know.
We are, okay.
I'm not a small guy. You can see that with the two of us sitting together. I've sat in a Roadster. I've not driven in one yet, and I'm not sure that I want to. How hard it was for me to get out of the Roadster when I'm starting out at 4 inches above the ground.
Very difficult.
Well, one of our customers who we talked about earlier, who has Roadsters here, actually is 6'2", and he had his Roadster modified, like Tom Selleck's 308 Ferrari, where they lowered the floorboard and extended the foot section in order to give him the room he needs to drive his Roadster. We actually have customers, Roadster customers, that sadly end up selling their cars because they can no longer do what's called the Roadster wiggle, or they've had a certain type of back surgery that no longer allows them to do that convoluted twisting motion as you get in and out of the car. But aside from that, it's a wonderful sports car, and a lot of fun to drive.
It is. I'm going to be talking to you about the Roadster wiggle at some time again.
Yeah.
It's a great term.
Well, I think we're coming to the end of our podcast, this Roadster podcast. I appreciate all of you joining us. Any of you that have questions beyond the podcast, like the German customer the last time, feel free to either comment on the podcast, which is posted on YouTube, or send us an email at ev@gruber.com. And next week, if all things go well and we get our Zoom capability fixed, or whatever we're going to use to bring Jameson Cummings into our podcast, you will be able to ask the first Roadster technician ever a whole bunch of questions about the Roadster. And believe me, he is full of great stories.
Thank you. Good afternoon. And
Oh, wait, real quick, guys. We got to announce the video one more time.
yeah.
Okay. So the video, it is posted. Is it currently live on YouTube?
It is not. No,
Okay.
I went ahead and started the processing of it. As soon as we're done here, we're going to check on it.
It takes a while to upload, okay. But yeah, I suggest those of you that have Roadsters, this is an important video for you to watch. It is the first indication, again, of what battery failure in a Roadster is going to be like. We've all been enjoying 15 years of battery life. I have VIN number 5. It still charges to 152 miles. I don't know what the CAC is, 148 or something like that, 145. But there is an expiration to those batteries. We all knew it was coming, and this appears to be the first indication of how it's going to happen. So watch the video, post any questions down below, and we will, oh, we have one more final question. Van Goat says, one of our normal, regular audience vendors, he says, Pete is built for the Roadster. He's absolutely correct. I can get in and out of that thing faster than guys like him can.
By all means.
We'll see you guys tomorrow morning.
Yep, tomorrow morning we've got our normal EV podcast, Tesla EV podcast. It will be at 10 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. And feel free to join us for that. And that's when we can entertain all the rest of the questions. One final one, Jiminy Stack just came in. He's a local EV enthusiast. And he says, good notes on the original Roadster. I can't wait for the new Roadster number 2. And Dan Rubach says, I will go watch the new video now. Thanks, guys. He doesn't have it quite posted. It takes a while to get these things uploaded, but within the next hour, okay.
Yeah, it's on its way out there. So good afternoon, and I hope you guys have a blessed afternoon and evening.
Thank you for joining us.